Hello, my name is Maxim VDW, and today I will introduce you to my new plugin called the QAPlugin. So this plugin basically allows you to create a personal assistant with artificial intelligence on your server. And you can ask questions to it like, "Bot, how are you?" And it will give you a response. And all these responses and questions can be configured in the configuration. So you may have seen a plugin similar to this on testplugins.com named Gary. This is basically the same, but it's public for first, and it has artificial intelligence. So it hooks into API.ai, which is a framework used in Google Home, Slack, Facebook bots, and other services that have personal assistants or bots. And it's pretty neat. You can create your own assistant. It's very useful if you have players that ask the same questions over and over again, and it brings some joy to your server because everyone loves to ask questions to the assistant and see what it replies. So yeah, let's jump to the configuration. First off, you have the disabled worlds. Here you can define if you want to disable the plugin in a specific world, and it won't listen for questions in those worlds and won't send announcements like the one you saw at the bottom, ask me anything. So yeah, next we have like 5 main sections of the plugin. We're going to go to the last section, which is the questions. Here you can create new questions. So every question you can name it whatever you want. But I suggest making a logical name. For example, plugin featherboard. I call this question. And under questions, these are the possible questions players can ask. Um, and it will check for those words. Next, we have the minimum matches. So if, for example, you only put in words here, like I did on the second question, it will check for minimum 2 matches in those questions. So if it finds hide and toggle, it reaches the minimum matches of 2, and it will give an answer. It will choose the question with the most matches. So if you have 2 similar questions, it will see what question is more similar to the actual question that's being asked. So if I, for example, try this, helper hide scoreboard, it will give me that response. But if I only ask helper hide, it will give me, it won't know the question. And I have a lot of predefined messages over here. So you can ask things like what world generator do you use, but I'm going to change the question a bit because I don't want to ask the exact same question. So if I, for example, ask helper, what is that world generator you are using to generate all these nice trees? It will give me a response because it found the word world generator that I configured here. And yeah, these are the answers. You can create as many answers as you want. It will randomly choose an answer. You can also use placeholders in here if you use MVW placeholder API or placeholder API from Clip. I think I'm using something, yes. So if I try to ask helper how much money do I have, it will give me the answer and say, yeah, use money next time because you don't have to ask me. And I configured it over here, so you can see I can use any placeholder. I suggest just checking all these questions out. There's some random questions I made. But yeah, that's the first thing section of the plugin. But it's not the coolest section yet. So the announcer, you already saw it, it's self-explaining. You can enable it. You can set the answer prefix to be the same as the answer. Randomize the questions, the interval in seconds, and the announcement list. So I think this is pretty basic. Next, we have our question settings. Here you can define the trigger words. So if your phrase starts or ends with one of these trigger words, it will trigger it as a question and try to find a question that matches the actual question you asked. And next we have some less important things, like you can hide the question for everyone except for the player. You can hide the question for everyone. And these are the global minimum matches that you saw earlier, configured separately in the questions. Next we have our answer settings. So you can broadcast the answer. This is the prefix, it can contain colors. The suffix, response delay, this will delay the answer so it seems more natural. And what to do when there is an unknown question. So it's enabled. If it's disabled, it will just not return anything when a question is not found. So if it does trigger but doesn't find a question, it will just return nothing. And these are some possible responses it can give you when it doesn't find a question. Last but definitely not least, we have our API.ai settings. So this client access token, you should keep it secret. I'm going to delete this one after this video. And this basically allows you to extend the API functionalities by 1,000 times. So this is a framework used in Google Home. And I'm going to open the site. This is the site, api.ai. And it basically allows you to, you can, for starters, you can create some you can use already built in domains, but most of these are paid, so I don't suggest using them. But you can try them out if you really would like them. For example, I have calculator enabled, so if I would ask what is the news today, it will give you a response. So it will give you a response. And if you would have paid for this, this would be you will be able to ask these questions inside your Minecraft server. Other things like 3 plus 3, and it will give you a response. So these are like basic things. You can do web browsing. There's a lot of things you can do. I don't know the price because it's on request. So yeah, I don't know. But you can make these things. You can make these things yourself. So for example, I have a few. This is a basic intent. So intents are like the same as your questions, but they can contain arguments. So for example, I have like, hello my friend, do something. These are two examples. And hello my friend is a parameter. And this parameter will be used in your response. So if I say something like, hey helper, Simon says I am cool, it will return I am cool because it returns my parameter. This is very basic. You can add fulfillment, which is basically something that allows you to send the question to your own web server, and you can do specific things on that web server, like ask for the weather or do something else, and then return the new response. So this is cool if you want to add like your own, if you want to program something, you can use this. And then we have our built-in, there's a built-in API in the QA plugin that allows you to, basically that allows you to create your own AI components. For example, I have one built in, which will check for color as the parameter. And if I say something like spawn green fireworks, it will do something. It will perform QAPlugin underscore firework as an action with the parameter color. So I'm going to try this. If I ask, hey helper, and the question doesn't need to be exact. So if I say something like, hey helper, it's almost New Year, launch some green, or no, I'm going to say red fireworks. And I don't think I have configured hey helper underscore as a trigger word, so that's why I think it doesn't detect the question. So now it sends red firework, and it's very easy to create something like this. So I have a wiki page on Spidget, which I'm going to see if I can find the correct page. I think it's this one, yes. Um, and yeah, here you can find some information. I'm not going to explain it all, but here you can find some basic information on how to create those custom actions. And yeah, I have some other intents made. For example, like if you want to report the user and this sends something to my web server that creates an email. So if I say, hey helper, report blue dragon 123 for griefing, for example. Wait, griefing e. Okay, sorry, hold on. Griefing, sorry. It will send the report. But if yeah, it will send the report. But this is something you have to create yourself. So it's not something that's built in. I'm going to turn off the sound for a second. Okay, so I hope you realize that this thing is very powerful. You can also create your own default failback responses, because when you enable this, the unknown questions section won't be used, because unknown questions are handled by the API AI. So these are like the basic default failbacks when it doesn't find a question. Um, there are a lot of different things I made. I also made like QA plugin item durability. Let's see if this works. Time set 0800. Let's set my game mode to 1. Give myself a pickaxe. Toggle down. False. Okay, and if I try helper, what is the damage on this item? It will say 0 because this item isn't damaged. But if I go back to game mode 0 and I start to damage the item and ask it again, it will give me an answer. And well, this is like a basic AI component. It's like a few lines of code. It's the first example. Yeah, it's the first example. It's like a few lines of code, but you can create whatever you want. And if you, for example, if the question, you can create multiple combinations of questions or whatever you want. Another cool thing is the training. So the training section on API AI allows you to see what kind of questions people ask. This allows you to see, for example, I asked height 6 times. So you can see, I may need to find a response for this, or if I create a question that isn't configured at all, for example, helper, how to survive the night, how to survive the night, things I want to check settings. So yeah, well, it will be available in the under training, so you can see under history that this is a question I asked or one of your players asked. And yeah, you can basically do whatever you want. It's very interesting to create some assistant that can respond to funny things. Um, hey helper, you are a noob. Uh, and yeah, you can configure all these messages. It's very useful. I hope you like the plugin, and yeah, see you soon.